How'd you like to listen to .NET Rocks with no ads? Easy. Become a patron. For just $5 a month, you get access to a private RSS feed where all the shows have no ads. $20 a month will get you that and a special .NET Rocks patron mug. Sign up now at patreon.netrocks.com. Hey, guess what? It's .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin.
And I'm Richard Campbell.
And we've been at this for many years.
1885, right? That's post-Louis. That's post-Civil War, man. You're almost a real country at this point.
Yeah, every once in a while, it just hits me like, holy crap, we're old.
Well, and 2000 is just not that far away. Right. Yeah. Like that's 2 more years, and we'll be there.
I just wait till somebody says back in the 2000s. Oh, God.
I mean, if you want to make it sound even worse, you can go back in the late 1900s.
Yes.
Yeah.
In the late 1900s.
1990. At the turn of the century.
Century.
It used to mean something different when I was in middle school.
Yeah. That's true.
Anyway, we've got a good show for you coming up. Martine Dowden is here, and we're going to be talking to her in a bit. But first, let's take care of Better Know Framework.
Awesome.
All
right, man. What do you got?
You're going to like this, buddy.
I always do. This
is a review on Engadget for the NVIDIA RTX 4070. Super.
Nice.
It's a 1440p powerhouse, and it's only $599. When was the last time you heard of a really powerful GPU video card for $600?
Yeah, you're right. This really says to me, we've gone back to sanity on video cards, right? Yeah. Because it got insane for a while there.
Yeah.
Although that 1440 thing is just like, this thing will do at 2560 by 1440, like 60 frames a second on most games, which is faster than your screen will refresh. So you're good.
And Engadget says, and it's a far better 4K gaming card than the 4070.
Right.
So this is the 4070 Super.
Right.
Apparently. Yeah.
Yeah. A few more cores, I don't even look at this for playing video games anymore. You know what I look at this for? Running your own large language model locally.
Yeah.
Right.
Or video, editing videos is what I use it for.
Yeah. I bet edit video would be pretty good too. But you hit a key point here for me, Carl, which is for a long time, for the past few years, you've been thinking $1,000 plus for a video card.
Oh, yeah.
And maybe you don't have to anymore.
Thank God. I think it was the crypto craze.
Yeah. It was part of it, and of course now the large language model craze isn't helping either. But
but most people aren't running those on their own machines.
You would hope.
Yeah, God, I would hope.
You would hope.
I know that you want to do that.
Yeah,
you have aspirations.
I also think it needs to be smaller anyway, right? Like, I don't like any technology when it's still on the curve. If we only make it bigger, it'll be better. But that seems to be tapering off for ChatGPT and the like now. Now there seems more tuning. Yeah. Getting a little smarter at what they're doing, not just chucking more 8chan into the data pile. That's not good.
Yeah.
Anyway, I appreciate you. That's a great find and a great reminder that, we may be software people, but we are beholden to the hardware.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's what I got, Richard. Who's talking to us today?
Grabbed a comment off of show 1624, going back a bit into 2019 when we were talking to Amy Kaepernick about CSS Grid, because I know we're going to talk a lot of CSS today.
Yeah.
And I pulled this comment from Andre Carlucci because it made me laugh. He said, "Hi, guys. Great show as always. I believe that centering things in CSS is the new, quote, how to exit Vim." Anyway, someone wrote this awesome website to solve this problem. And it is howtocenterinCSS.com.
Oh, God.
There really is a site called howtocenterinCSS.com.
Oh, that's so great.
So, just go there. It's a website.
Yeah.
They will help you.
It's one of those things.
Or you can get Martine's book, one or the other.
It's one of those things you have to look up every single time.
Every
single time.
But yeah, howtocenterinCSS.com. It works wonders. Exiting Vim, Still a mystery.
It's
Cheers.
like the new exit word perfect for DOS. Remember that? You press escape and it would say, search. What would you like to find? I'm like, no, get me out of here.
Yeah. Now, just as a reminder, if you need to exit Vim, if it's been stuck there for a while, you press escape, then :Q L enter.
Yeah.
Obviously.
Right.
Andre, thanks for the giggle, man. And a copy of Music to Code By is on its way to you. And if you'd like a copy of Music to Code By, write a comment on the website at .netrocks.com or on the Facebooks. We publish every show there. And if you comment there and we read it on the show, we'll send you a copy of Music to Code By.
You know, about Vim, my mother-in-law would say, that programmer needs shooting.
Isn't that a defense in Texas? Your Honor,
Yeah.
he needed shooting.
He needed shooting. That boy needed shooting. Well, anyway, you could send us a tweet or an X or whatever the hell they call it these days. I'm at Carl Franklin and he's at Rich Campbell, but the cool kids are hanging out on Mastodon. I'm at Carl Franklin at techhub.social.
And I'm Rich Campbell at mastodon.social.
Send us a toot. We'll read it. I swear to God.
Yep. Preferably not with
We
shooting.
may not respond.
No shooting required.
But no shooting involved. All right. Let's bring on Martine, an award-winning CTO, UX, UI designer and developer, international speaker, and author. Martine Dowden focuses on web interfaces that are beautiful, functional, accessible, and usable. She approaches user experience from both art and science, drawing from her degrees in psychology and visual communications. She's worked as a developer, artist, educator, and consultant since 2005. In 2015, she published a children's book, Programming Languages ABC++. It's a great title. She then went on to write Approachable Accessibility, Planning for Success, which was released in June 2019, and Architecting CSS, the Programmer's Guide to Effective Style Sheets in 2020. Currently, she's the CTO at Andromeda Galactic Solutions, where she continues to learn, work on, and share her passion for front-end development. Welcome back to the show, Martine.
Thanks for having me back. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, it's our pleasure.
Yeah, good to be back, actually. And I just felt like we haven't cried about CSS much lately, so I should call Martine.
Well, hopefully I won't make you cry.
No, you are the Kleenex to our CSS tears.
There you go. That's sweet.
Yep.
I need a jar, just like the teachers that have like jars of like tears of misbehaving students. I have
That's
tears of developers trying to do CSS.
Crushed by CSS.
Yep.
I just wanted to center a div, man. How hard can it be?
We should create a card game, CSS against humanity.
And all of the answers are just the weird expressions in CSS you never wanted to know about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or little diagrams of boxes outside of boxes. Explain this.
Yeah. You need to build a response query. Do you A?
Funny.
Oh, man.
Where the heck do we start? What have you been working on lately?
Well, I actually got a new book. It just came out. It's called Tiny CSS Projects. It is, so unlike the previous books, well, the first one, the kids book, is a whole different ballgame, but the other two were more, a lot more theory and explaining and more the high level. This one was nitty gritty, like here's a project and here's how you would do it. So instead of going at it from a theory perspective, it was very much an application, and you can totally like code along with it. And there's a repo with it with the starting HTML. So it's very much here's a thing you might want to do. And so picking the projects in there, I was trying to figure out like what are things that I regularly do in my career? Like what are some things I'm regularly asked to do? And then what are some concepts that are really important for people to know? And you marry the two and you get 12 projects. And so so it's very much things where, as much as the chapters get more and more difficult as you progress through the book, it's very much hey, I don't remember how to do that thing. Let me go look up how it was done. And you could totally use it that way as well.
So not just a read through book, but a jump to remind yourself of book.
Right. Exactly.
What's up with the bustle on the cover?
I was given 3 choices in terms of the cover picture by Manning, and I picked the one that looked...
It's funny how they wouldn't let the designer design her own design book by design.
But it is part of an imprint, the tiny imprint. So they have an aesthetic, right?
Yeah, it's like most of their books have that same. It's from a series of plates, and they're all like drawings from costume and stuff, different places around the world and eras, and so it's a series, and so they're picking off of those plates, right? So
it's so funny. I mean, I like naming stuff in software, making a book cover that hasn't already been made before. Not a simple problem. Like, very challenging. But I like this. It makes the book approachable to call it tiny. I think, it's just like, oh, they're just little projects. It's going to be fine. You're going to be fine.
So let's start off with a gripe from this old guy here, me. In programming, one of the things I love about writing code is reusability. Like all the things that I do over and over again, I can put in a library and I can just include that library, and I got all my extension methods and I got all that stuff. And CSS is really kind of a global thing unless you do some tricks to scope it, like Blazor and other frameworks do this. But is there any such thing in the CSS world as we have in the development world? These are CSS things that I use all the time, and I want them in some easy to customize into my app thing without busting over everything else that's in there, isolated, scoped, reusable.
Yeah, so there's several ways to approach it. Like everything in development, it depends. Let me just put that one right there. But so there's I would say the most straightforward, easiest way to do that would be by class name, right? So if you have, let's say I have a company brand. So I have, certain colors I need all of my buttons to look like. I have a certain theme all of my tables need to have, like things that are not generally like individual page specific, but are going to be like all headers need to look like X, all paragraphs need to look like Y, right? At that point, you can make a global style sheet that has all of those styles that you could apply to every project within, or every website or every web page within that institution, right? So that could be kind of step one.
And I guess with class names, you could, always prefix them with some unique value that, such as your name or your company or whatever.
Right.
So they wouldn't clash with everything else.
Exactly. So and usually what you're going to do at that point is at a company level, you're going to come up with a convention for that, right? So for us at Andromeda, because it's Andromeda Galactic Solutions, our prefix for most everything are going to be AGS dash something. Right.
Yeah.
Because then we know. The other option is, and this is new, so it's not yet very widely supported, but CSS is coming out with the ability to have an at scope. So the same way you have an at media query or something like that. It's starting to have the concept. It's going to have the concept of at scope, which will allow us to go ahead and say, this is only for this particular thing. And so we won't have to muddy up our class names with prefixes and stuff like that. So there's kind of the two sides of like, how deep does it need to go? Does this need to be something that is brand specific where there's colors involved, or is this something I want to be able to manipulate for various different brands or whatever? Because the other option is also CSS with CSS custom properties. It's really easy to set yourself a baseline style sheet where all of the things you might want to manipulate, your colors, how much padding, maybe your font, which font you're using, all of those you put in as CSS properties. And then in your project, you're going to say, all right, variable A equals blah, 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 B equals C equals, and then you can go ahead and just plug in. So that would be kind of the way if I were to have to write one like this afternoon for a project. Yeah.
I was thinking of like the centering example is perfect, right? Center a grid, show a grid with X many things and, rows and columns or whatever, formatted this way. Those kinds of things that I do over and over again for each project, but it would be really great to just say, oh, I have a class for that already. Let me pull out my global CSS file that has all my things in it. And
so those would be more like utility classes. And I I personally have a beef with those, simply because what ends up happening is let's say you have a class that takes texts and makes it center aligned, whatever, right?
Sure.
You're going to put that class in your HTML for that paragraph, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now you've mixed the concept of I'm styling this particular paragraph with what the content is in your HTML itself. So if I want to change the style of that paragraph, I have to go mess with the HTML rather than the CSS, which is what I should be messing with. So the semantics of the utility classes can't, depending on how they're implemented and used, can make it so now you're mixing your content and your styles, and it also means that those classes are getting put into your HTML absolutely everywhere. So let's say you're wanting to rebrand or retheme something, and now everything that was centered you want to the left or something like that, or whatever was orange now becomes blue. You're having to go change all of that HTML instead of the one place in CSS.
I guess you could do what Bootstrap does, right?
Yeah.
You could do what Bootstrap does, which is just sort of make class names and then swap them out with different implementations.
So if you're working in Sass or Less or Silas or something like that, what you can do is make your utility classes as things that you can extend inside of your CSS class for that piece. And that decreases that problem a lot, because then you have your code snippet and you're essentially saying in my CSS class at that point for whatever the piece, I can say import, I want to use my snippet A, my snippet B, my snippet B by just doing, extend A, extend B, extend C. And that works pretty well. And that kind of allows for a happy medium between the two. But I personally don't like putting utility classes names directly in my HTML because of the maintainability aspect long term.
That makes a lot of sense.
Of course, I went and looked up scope in the Mozilla docs just to see, I added it to the show notes because it's officially considered experimental, but Chromium's already fully implemented it. So it's Chrome, Edge, Chrome on Android. They're already running it. So,
yep.
Yeah, it's interesting to see, doesn't work in Safari. Shocker. Actually, no, the preview version of Safari supports it. But
what's funny with Safari is I have a love-hate relationship with it, because they're on some things, they've actually been ahead of the curve. And then in some CSS properties, they've actually been ahead of Chrome. And then on some things, they're lacking behind. So, depending on what I'm doing that day, I'm be like,
yeah. That's really interesting. It's not that they don't lag everything. Like, I don't know what the priority list looks like.
Well, and recently, I'd say within the last, started sometime during the pandemic, they started really catching up on stuff, at least on the CSS side.
Yeah, because they were kind of a blocker on the WA side too for a while there.
And they still, from anything, and that's more of it's an Apple issue entirely on anything JavaScript, PWA, that sort of stuff. They're still a pain in the butt.
Now they don't like. I always get a sense it's like anything that looks like you wouldn't use the store, they're unhappy.
Yeah,
they're going to drag on it.
But CSS, they've been holding their own pretty well. I've been from a CSS standpoint, their Find Firefox, depending on the use case, has kind of been interesting. And it depends on the property. Like Subgrid, Chrome was the last one to get it. And then, it really just depends on what it is. Like, it's property specific. I'd say right now, Firefox, Chrome, and Safari are probably on par, depending on which of the latest of what you're looking at.
Only until you dig into the very nooks and crannies, and if you're digging there, you're looking for your own trouble anyway.
Probably. Or you're playing my game, which is like, ooh, this just came out. Which of the Nightly's Canary, completely unstable version has it, so I can play with it? That game, right?
Which of the on fire versions can render this twice before it crashes my machine?
Exactly.
Not that I would know. How would I know that? Well, I'm usually pressing against language features like that. It's like, oh, that's interesting. Let's see how that works. Oh, that doesn't work at all. Okay.
I think the hardest part, and thankfully I think the browser world learned their lesson with Grid, is that IE had implemented a non-standard version of Grid.
Yeah.
While it was still experimented.
IE had at one time or another, every version of IE implemented a non-standard version of everything.
Right.
Well, yeah.
Right. I mean, the real issue with IE 6.
IE 5 for Mac. It was 5 or 4. Maybe it was 5. One of the two was the very first browser to fully implement. Let's start with IE5 for Mac. That's the big funny one about that. It was IE for Mac, which was already weird. Yeah, it was the very first to fully implement the CSS spec.
Right. But IE6 implemented a version of the spec that wasn't ratified. So it was a unique version of CSS.
Which is kind of funny because they went from being the very first to fully implement the spec at the time to whatever it became, which, is the source of all memes now.
Yeah. There's the old article from 2000. IE5 for Mac is a quantum leap for browsers.
There you go. Yeah.
Oh, so much pain.
I remember when I was excited about IE9. That was like the one with the JavaScript
version, right?
Yeah, with the JavaScript engine. And
rounded corners.
Yeah.
Dun. Yes. The CSS person's in the room, so that's what she's going to refer to, right? Yes, rounded corners.
Yep, the CSS3 rounded corners.
Yeah.
But no, I think I'd rather wait a little bit longer for a feature to come out and not have to deal with the chaos that a non-standard spec at some point being implemented became than getting it faster just to have to, because once it's out there, people are going to use it in prod. You can say don't use it in prod all you want.
Yeah,
it's not going to happen.
And it's not like we don't have a good feature set right now. It's back in the shim days. Remember those?
Yes.
Because we had very uneven browsers. It was just that was the transition from HTML4 to HTML5. And now we're kind of over that. And it's you know what I'm really looking for in a browser? Stability.
Yep.
Just to do the thing. I won't press too hard against the edge of the language if you don't break it for me. How about that?
I still have an old version of Firefox if I update it, all the features that I love will break. So I have to put up with the constant Jack Russell Terrier in the top right corner going,
You should update. You should
update now. Update now. How about now? How about now? How about now?
I had an app the other day that massively we started getting errors in the log we'd never seen before. So of course, that's cause for concern, and we're looking at it and we're like, what is generating all of this garbage? And we look and it's this ancient Windows phone, and I'm like, no, we're not supporting that. I don't care.
We're not fixing that.
Nope.
Atlee Hunter will never be able to use your websites. No, he's the only one using a Windows phone, as far as I know.
Yeah, I don't even know if he is anymore. The battery's got to be down on those phones. It's been quite a few years.
At some point, it's a security risk because they're not updating it anymore.
If you can't get on the internet, you're really not at a risk, right?
Yeah,
that's true.
You got a point there, Mr. Campbell.
Oh, I miss my phone. I didn't rebuild my phone shrine in the new office, so I should go dig it out. It's in a box somewhere. But that last $950,
it's a $1,000 calculator.
Yeah, not except for the fact that it won't hold a charge anymore for sure. Yeah.
None of my old Windows phones hold a charge. They're in the drawer of broken dreams for sure.
It's a different kind of broken dream, but definitely.
Yeah.
The one I missed the most is my HTC with a slide-out keyboard. That's the phone I missed.
Back when phones were cool, that's the real sin of the iPhone, right? Before the iPhone, phones had fun stuff, right?
BlackBerry. Do you
remember having the GPS receiver we could plug into the top of the phone to stick on the side of the RV so you could track us if we drove across? Mm-hmm. Yes. Life was, gear was way more interesting these days.
All right, we really got to talk to the young kids now. They're tuning out right now as we geek out.
I don't know if that's
the bad old days.
Anyway,
I'll just hand him an old Bakelite rotary phone and have him dial a number and see how long it takes. It'll be fine.
We don't like people with zeros in our phone numbers. Oh, back in my day. All right, we got to stop that. That's not good.
All right, so let's talk about your book. What are some of the new
most of it, as much as there are some things where we tried to kind of really butt up to how to the new stuff, right? We do present grid, we do present flex. We tried to stay within the bounds of, at least, when it was published earlier this year, of what was going to be fairly well supported, right? Because the whole point is for it to be practical. Like 99% of development, especially in CSS, yeah, there's cool stuff coming out, and it's very, very useful. However, it's not useful if you can't use it in prod. And most people that I've run into when they're struggling with CSS, they're either CSS is their jam and they're going to go play with the cutting edge because that's their jam, or they're struggling with it and they just want the bloody answer and they don't care how fancy it is and they don't care about the bells and whistles. They just want it to work, right? There's very few people in between. So we tried to stay on these are things that are widely implemented and are going to just work. However, I am in the process of finishing a course that's a 4-part module, like what they call their life projects for Manning, which is actually dealing with the cutting edge, where I specifically want to find the latest and greatest, the new properties like has and where, things like scroll animations, those kind of things that are the extreme that are definitely not implemented everywhere. Where at the beginning of each module, I'm like, okay, you need this browser, this version or up, this browser, this version of up. Yeah. Here's how you turn on flags so that you can look at these new versions. But for the book, we tried to stay standard.
But I don't know you want to print that on paper.
Right. Well, that's the thing. That's why the live version, the live book, because that's a web thing and that's not on paper. Because it's going to, half of what I did for that, even though it's coming out, later, a little bit later, month or so, probably roughly, it's already like, okay, now there's 2 more browsers that already support it. Right. So it's ever what is cutting edge is ever shifting anyway. But the book tried to stay within the realm of what'll work nicely everywhere.
I'm also the mind of like, if the person reading this book need the edge of CSS or still working through the fundamentals, right? Like, where are they?
Yeah, that's hard.
Yeah,
that's hard.
I mean, I get good CSS for like an hour, then it passes, right? Yeah. And then you got to start over again. The next time it's like, I have to style what? No. Then you get back into it again. So I kind of feel like, this is the book for me, just because I can go back and read that piece again and say, maybe I can do this.
What I feel is interesting about, if you don't do CSS, there's kind of 2 things that are hard with CSS. It's really easy to get into a situation where if the code was hacked together to begin with, where somebody that was unsure and, struggling with how do I get this done and not necessarily thinking about the overall architecture and maintainability of it, right? Because it's very hard to worry about good architecture and maintainability when you're struggling with, can I just make the thing work?
Just make the font bigger.
So code that has been written that way is going to be harder to maintain. And so it's kind of a self kind of feeding loop of the code that was written by somebody who was unsure of themselves, didn't maybe go about it the most efficient way or the most clear-cut way or
this is
whatever.
The most polite description of the spaghetti that CSS that people make. It's not just that you finally got it to work, is that you didn't clean up all the stuff all your failed attempts either, right?
Yeah.
Or you just don't know fundamental things about how stuff goes together and how it doesn't.
So just like anything, spaghetti code is hard.
CSS is hard to write, but CSS is way harder to read, right? Like, I'm looking at the style and going, like, what does this do? This is hard.
When it depends on what the parents do and what the parents of those do, and because there's the inheritance aspect and all of that as well, right? So you can't even look at a specific class and say, this is what's happening, right?
Yeah,
right. Until you see how it's implemented.
Mm-hmm.
Although the F11 tools today are pretty good about showing you what styles are applying to a given object.
Yes. And you can look, what's nice too is you can look at if you look at the computed, it'll show you everything that's applied to a particular element and then allow you to drill down, like most browsers will allow you to do that, which is really nice when you're like, why in the ever-loving anything. Is this thing doing this, right?
All of the expletives. Well,
yes. I'm trying
certainly
to
had
keep it clean for your show, but yeah.
I appreciate that. You're very kind. But it's the next part is like, so why is that style applying? I can see that it is. I just don't know why.
And where is it coming from?
Yeah.
That's the other big piece, right?
And we're going to follow up on that thought right after these very important messages. We'll be right back. And you're listening to .NET Rocks. I'm Carl Franklin. That's my buddy Richard Campbell.
Hey.
And Martine Dowden is here. We're talking CSS. And before we get back into it, I just want to remind you that, yes, sometimes you don't hear ads, and that's great because Spreaker puts them in. But if you never want to hear ads, you could join our Patreon group, patreon.netrocks.com, and you'll get a custom feed that has 0 inserted ads. Only the ones that we speak ourselves. All right. So enough of that. Martine, I don't know if you're the right person to ask about this, but I got to know, is ChatGPT any good at figuring out CSS like it is at figuring out code?
I have not had a good track record with it. I have gotten to where more often than not, ChatGPT tries to... One, I found it too noisy because I can write it. I can write the CSS faster than, like, if I'm using Copilot or whatever. I can write it significantly faster than anything it can feed me.
Copilot does good with CSS? No.
Did she quietly say no?
No, she.
I am quietly saying that the issue isn't an issue of context. What I find may be a much better use of AI, if you're not sure, would be things like the chat asking it, what is this code doing? Or what is the property for X? Like essentially using it like a glorified Stack Overflow.
Sure.
The downside to it, though, is that Stack Overflow, you have comments and arrow ups and downs to tell you, to give you some inkling of how good this answer is, right? ChatGPT doesn't have that, or any of the other AIs don't have kind of that context. So you're losing a little bit of information by doing it that way. But that's about the extent that I personally have like relegated AI to in my CSS. I don't think it's quite there. Like maybe if there was a model built specifically for it, maybe if it was, like I just don't think you're going to get the quality out of it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and that's been my experience too.
Can you get it to hack something together? Sure, probably. Will it be a good quality solution? I doubt it. Like that's kind of where I'm at.
Doubt it. Yeah, and it never is. So is there a better, Visual Studio and Visual Studio Code are great because they let you do whatever you want, but it seems like, with tools like, GitHub Copilot and things, that people want a little more guidance in when they're developing anyway. And, CSS being global and cascading, and multiple layers and levels. We said it before, when you're looking at a class, you don't really know the context of it. And especially when you're utilizing it in multiple divs or Ps or whatever your elements are. Is there anything that can help you visualize that, or any tooling that is better at saying, let's say that you're trying to put flex stuff on something that's inside a grid, or the other way around, and that's going to cause bizarre results. Is there anything that says, hey, whoa, you probably want to do it this way instead?
I don't know of anything that's that does that at the moment off the top of my head. I'm also a terrible person to ask because I know the CSS, right? I don't go looking for those tools. I go looking for articles or explanations or the details, or I'll go read the docs on whatever the new features are coming out of. And in terms of the fundamental day in and day out, I don't use those in any way, shape, or form. So I don't have a need for those. What I would say is,
maybe we'll put that to the listeners.
Yeah. What I would say though is that CSS is one of those things that you can get up and running and write your first line of CSS successfully very, very quickly. right? There's very little knowledge that needs to come into being able to say, to put on an HTML element, style, blah, blah, blah. Or even if you go one step further and put a style sheet, being able to say font weight bold, right? There's very little, it takes a very, very little to get started. But it is actually a fairly complex and difficult language to actually learn. And I think what's happening with CSS is is that there's a lot of looking for a magic bullet because it looks so easy on the surface, when it really, there is a fundamental knowledge where it needs to be, just like any other skill, it would be learned. If I went around asking for a magic bullet for writing .NET tomorrow, I'd get laughed at, right? They'd be like, haha, cute, right? And I feel like because CSS has this like it appears simple when it really isn't, that we tend to go looking for these magical things instead of just sitting down and learning it. Like a skill.
Bootstrap fixes everything, Martine. Didn't you know?
Oh no, it's and I'm gonna get hate. I'm gonna get hate for this. It's Tailwinds now. That's the magic bullet.
Tailwinds fixes everything.
Tailwinds, the new hotness. But here's the thing. Like, as a developer, I liken CSS because of the way that you don't really understand until you see its implementation in the parents and the parents of parents. It'd be like having a class that has no inheritance on it, and yet it inherits from 3 or 4 different ancestors, right? And so you wouldn't know that by looking at the class.
The dev tools,
you would only know it by the implementation. It's like having classes that you just throw together, and when you're looking at code, you don't know what it's actually working on. I think that speaks to Richard's confusion, which is just like, I have no idea what this means in the context of my application.
The Chrome DevTools do a really good job at showing you the inheritance, though. At this point, if you're looking at, if you're wanting to see what all is being applied and where it all is coming from, and the ability to do like, what is all inherited on a particular element, it's very granular to the element, but you can absolutely get that history and that inheritance and where everything's coming from. But you're
right once it's mixed with the implementation, yes.
But you're going to see it in the dev tools. I don't know of now. There are a handful of plugins and stuff for VS Code where you can see but it's no different than doing Control Shift Find, where you can go find every place that uses a particular class. But that's the dev tools at that point in the browser is going to be your best bet for
you're lost without the dev tools if you're doing any CSS whatsoever.
Yeah.
Because you have to see it in the context of where it's implemented.
One is very visual. Like, I need to be able to see, is this red actually, is it actually turning red, or is it actually is this button actually got its background or its border or its whatever. There's no, you're going to have to go put it to the browser anyway, right?
Yeah. What do you think about Figma?
It's a design tool. It spits out pre-made CSS.
But there's pre-made CSS and there's pre-made CSS, right?
The pre-made CSS it spits out is fine. There's nothing inherently wrong with it. The downside is one of the patterns that I do see, which is something to be careful of, is what happens, especially when you're using something like Angular or React, which is component-based. And now you have, especially with Angular, you'll have your CSS isolation to the component right there in the thing. So you get designer writes beautiful component in Figma. Figma spits out CSS. Developer takes CSS from Figma, sticks it into the component CSS. Great. Now we've done that 50 times for things that should be pretty much like your style, your font family, your color, that should have been global styles to begin with. So there's a little bit of having to, if you're being smart about it, and if you're thinking through, this should be a global style, this should be a global style, let's not copy it everywhere. It's what it spits out is perfectly fine. And it's really good for things like the designer put a gradient behind this thing, right? Yeah. Spitting out the actual CSS gradient is super helpful because, I can sit there and try to figure out what all colors you did, but
drop shadows, things like that.
Why? Right, exactly. So for those sorts of things, it's actually quite helpful.
Yeah.
But anything, we need to, use our brains and not be.
Right.
Well, this strikes me as the difference between a set of unit tests and an actual functional test. Like there's an architecture to good styling
Yes.
that no given page manifests fully. Like, and I think it's really hard to have a tool think broadly for you like that.
Right. Exactly.
I still feel like I just got to call the expert. Like, I don't know that I'm going to have, unless I really want to commit myself to it. It's like getting that design right is hard.
Well, but that's fine. Like, I'm not going to go be writing massive backends either. If I need a fancy backend, a bunch of fancy, like, I don't know, SQL or something, I'm not going to be writing. I'm going to be calling an expert. Like, that's just not right.
Give it its due, right? There's skills, and you can't do them all. So you bring in your expert when you need them.
Exactly.
And that makes perfect sense. But it does feel to me like you end up with nuggets of good styling from Figma. And it takes then the architect to pull in these various pieces of renderings and say, okay, what does the overall template look like now?
Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, that's fair, and it it's no different than, like you said, designing a back end where you take a set of spikes on some hard pieces to try and figure out how to make this thing work, and then at some point you got to sit back and say, okay, I see a service architecture that looks like this.
Yep.
Right, the sort of broad view that. Now, when I think about it from a services point of view, it's very much the whole system doesn't resonate with change. That when a likely change comes in, the smallest footprints has to be modified. I don't know. Do you consider that in styling? That it's not hard to update the style without having to rip the whole thing apart?
Well, absolutely, because SAS now has functions. So that's a whole different ballgame, right? Like that's a whole, but in pure CSS, right? When you're doing a style change, there's it's a little bit of a different thought process than, say, updating like a JavaScript service or something. One of the the first thing you're going to say, is this a special cookie change? As in, is this particular element or this particular thing on this page its own special whatever that needs a specific thing because it's different? Or is this a global change? Right. And so that will dictate how that change happens, if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, totally. Now I start thinking in terms of the difference between the class and the style, where have we done a good set of class definitions so that when we want to restyle it, you're just changing styling again. The classes aren't changing, so the assignments don't need to change. You're just changing the styling.
Exactly. Because in theory, I should be able to reskin an entire application without ever touching anything but the CSS. That's the golden standard,
right? Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly.
My experience with CSS and Zen Garden is many examples of how I'm inadequate at this.
Yeah, right? I know. It has a way of doing that, doesn't it?
You know what? I'm not this good. I am not this good.
So, Martine, I'm going to shift gears here a little bit. What is your favorite style of music to play on your saxophone?
Look at that. Yeah, that's my new baby. For probably jazz. I love jazz.
Oh, really cool. Like classic jazz or avant-garde or
a little Bird?
Coltrane, a little Bird.
I mean, if you play saxophone and you don't like Coltrane, I don't know.
Why are you even playing saxophone?
Exactly. I think probably one of my favorites is Brubeck. Honestly, it's one of my I have a number of Pandora stations that were started with like Brubeck as the seed. You go down from there, and
that's how you got there and you stayed.
Yeah, exactly.
I went back and I listened to a bunch of Paul Desmond albums. He's the guy who wrote Take 5, and he was alto player in Brubeck's quartet. And man, he's just so good, so
Isn't
tasty.
He? Yeah,
amazing.
Yeah. No, there's no day where Little Take 5 doesn't make it better.
You got it.
True enough. Yeah,
exactly. So, is there such thing as a jazz style in CSS? Now I'm just reaching for dumb questions.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. She actually thought about that for a second.
Me too.
I smelled the smoke from here. Okay.
I mean, you can make a jazz themed layout.
Of course you can. Yeah, I want little notes to come out of my cursor when I move it around the screen and get big and then just go off.
Oh, the late 90s called. They're wanting their UI back. You know, with the little snow and the little flames.
Oh, yeah. Hamster
Give me my
dance.
GeoCities.
Hamsterdance.com.
Oh, right. Space Jam's website is still up from like 1995.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
Wow.
and still looks exactly the same too.
I demonstrated the writing an HTML stealer on the Amsterdam site. So I actually had a local copy of the Amsterdam site for the longest time. I probably have it on a backup file
It's
somewhere.
all it is just a table of animated GIFs,
and
an
a
audio
sped up,
file.
messed up version of a Disney song that if you actually publish on a page, you will get pinged. You'll get DCMA'd on.
Okay, back to reality. So is there anything else that you want to talk about in your book that we haven't talked about yet?
Trying to think of what else.
What's the hard project? What's number 12?
Oh, so number 12 is actually not the hard project. For number 12, what I did is I took, I went and got like, what are some things because everything up to chapter 12, so 11 down, are all in pure vanilla CSS. Like there's no frameworks, no nothing. For 12, what I did is I brought in Sass so that I could show like, here are some things or some reasons why you might want to use something like Sass. And so I really, like, as much as the project isn't particularly difficult, I just showed some of the things that you could do in terms of looping in functions and having a pseudo, they call it a map. It's kind of a cross between an array and an object, really. Like where you can have if statements where like you're literally putting in logic inside of your CSS at that point. So I was wanting to not necessarily do a deep dive into Sass, but be like, here are some of the things it can do and the reasons why you might want to use it. But now you have a build process you have to contend with, right? Because with CSS, I can just call the CSS style sheet. Now there's a build process involved. So.
I appreciate that because, when you have a powerful tool like Sass, everything becomes a nail, right? And you want to use it everywhere. So I appreciate the fact that you're saying, well, wait a minute, maybe, if you commit to Sass, then you have some more responsibilities. Right. And, yes, it's powerful, but,
The advantage, though, is that now there's a compiler and or transpiler or everybody can have their little debate on that one later. But the point is, it's either going to compile or it won't. So unlike CSS, where I can write a broken style sheet and put it on the web, it's a lot more like that has a built-in verification in terms of does it compile. So, there's pros and cons on that build step, but it changes things.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate that objectivity and, not the absolutism that a Sith would bring to the party, for example. Only a Sith speaks in absolutes. So what else is there? What's next for you? What's coming up in your inbox?
Well, I mean, I'm currently figuring out my conference schedule for this year. So, we'll see. Not sure exactly where I'll be, when, what, how, but I'm definitely looking at conferences and user groups. Well,
I happen to know somebody who runs a conference. Maybe we should talk to him about that.
Nothing.
Well, you can have them email me and I will gladly take a look.
It's Richard, actually.
I know.
Let's talk about him while he's right here.
I just included a link to Take 5 on YouTube in the show notes because everybody should go listen to that.
That's such a great song.
If you've never listened to it, even if you don't like jazz or don't understand it, you're going to love this.
It's such a great song.
Yeah.
And a great sax song at that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. Well.
But yeah, I think that's what's kind of coming up. Since I just finished up the book and I'm finishing up a course. I think might go back to blogging for a little bit to kind of, lower commitment things for a little bit. We'll see. I mean, you can't turn down opportunities when they come knocking. So we'll see how long that lasts. But yeah.
All right. Well, Martine, thank you very much. It's been eye-opening and enlightening and all that goes with it. So thanks again.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. Come back soon. And we'll talk to you next time on .NET Rocks. .NET Rocks is brought to you by Franklin's Net and produced by Plop Studios, a full-service audio, video, and post-production facility located physically in New London, Connecticut, and of course in the cloud. Online at pwop.com. Visit our website at dotnetrocks.com for RSS feeds, downloads, mobile apps, comments, and access to the full archives going back to show number 1, recorded in September 2002. And make sure you check out our sponsors. They keep us in business. Now go write some code. See you next time.